I never thought that a simple trip to the grocery store could turn into a nightmarish experience. The fluorescent lights hummed above, casting an eerie glow over the worn linoleum floors. My footsteps echoed through the empty aisles as I ventured into the store, my breath visible in the chilled air. Little did I know that this ordinary errand would lead me to a disturbing encounter that would haunt me for years to come. As I perused the shelves, selecting items from my shopping list, a strange feeling began to crawl up my spine. I tried to dismiss it as mere paranoia, but each time I glanced over my shoulder, I felt like I was being watched. The bustling sounds of shopping carts and chatter seemed to fade into the background, replaced by an unsettling silence that wrapped around me like a suffocating blanket. In aisle 5, I noticed a tall, lanky man clad in a tattered coat and an old fedora hat. He stood out like a sore thumb among the regular shoppers. His cold, unblinking eyes met mine for a brief moment before he turned away and pretended to be browsing the shelves. I couldn't shake off the feeling that he was following me, lurking in the shadows of the store. To test my suspicion, I decided to change my route and double back on my steps. Sure enough, as I wandered through the aisles, there he was, seemingly coincidentally browsing nearby shelves. My heart quickened its pace, and the pit of fear in my stomach grew deeper. I couldn't fathom why this stranger was tailing me, but I knew I had to find a way to escape his unsettling presence. Rushing to the cashier, I hoped to leave the store as quickly as possible. However, when I turned, I saw him again, standing not too far behind me, observing my every move. Panic set in as I realized I couldn't simply walk away. I mustered up the courage to confront him, asking if he needed something. His lips curled into an unsettling smile as he replied in a raspy voice, "Oh, no need to worry, just browsing, you know. But I couldn't help but notice you seem familiar." My heart pounded in my chest and I nervously laughed it off, insisting we hadn't met before. Yet, he persisted, mentioning specific details about my life that sent shivers down my spine. I felt violated, exposed to a degree I couldn't comprehend. How could he possibly know such personal things about me? Desperate to escape, I quickly gathered my bags and made my way to the exit, his eyes still locked on me. As I stepped outside, relief washed over me, but my unease remained. I decided to shake him off by taking a long detour home, ensuring he wouldn't know where I lived. Days passed, and I tried to convince myself that it was all a coincidence, that I had overreacted. But then, one evening, as I returned home from work, I caught a glimpse of him standing across the street, staring directly at my house. Fear consumed me, and I rushed inside, locking all the doors and windows. From that day on, he seemed to be everywhere I went, the grocery store, my workplace, even the park I frequented. His presence was suffocating, like an ever-present shadow haunting my every step. I couldn't escape him, no matter how hard I tried. Paranoia became my constant companion, and I isolated myself from friends and family, fearing that he might harm them too. My life was consumed by terror, and my world shrank to a mere existence filled with anxiety and dread. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months, and the creepy stranger's presence never waned. Paranoia became my constant shadow, lurking around every corner. I barricaded myself at home, avoiding any contact with the outside world. Friends and family reached out, concerned for my sudden reclusion, but I couldn't bear to put them in danger. In the solitude of my fear, I searched for answers, trying to understand who this man was and what his intentions were. Late at night, I delved into the depths of the internet, looking for any clue that might shed light on his enigmatic presence in my life. The search led me down rabbit holes of conspiracy theories and online forums dedicated to mysterious encounters, but nothing seemed to connect to my own chilling experience. Sleep eluded me, haunted by nightmares that blurred the lines between reality and fiction. Each morning, I would find myself drenched in cold sweat, unable to differentiate between the terrors of the night and the horrors of the day. In a desperate attempt to reclaim my life, I sought the help of a private investigator. I provided them with all the information I had gathered about the man who had been following me. The investigator promised to look into the matter discreetly, giving me a glimmer of hope that I might finally find some resolution. Meanwhile, my once vibrant and colorful world turned gray, like a faded photograph of happier times. I couldn't escape the feeling of being trapped in an unending nightmare. Every moment outside my home felt like stepping into a lion's den. and even the most ordinary places became labyrinths of danger. The grocery store, once a mundane part of life, had transformed into a terrifying battleground. The simple act of buying groceries now involved elaborate strategies to avoid being seen, sneaking through the aisles like a thief in the night. I found myself looking over my shoulder every few seconds, expecting his sinister face to appear from behind a cereal box. My nerves frayed, and the lines between reality and illusion blurred. I became a ghost of my former self, my once cheerful demeanor replaced with a perpetual sense of dread. The weight of anxiety bore down on me like a boulder, and I feared I would never escape this living nightmare. Then, one evening, the investigator delivered some unsettling news. They couldn't find any concrete information on the man who had been haunting me. It was as if he didn't exist, leaving behind no traces of his past or his intentions. The investigator advised me to seek help from the police, but without any evidence of a crime, their hands were tied. With no one to turn to, I realized that I had to confront this sinister presence myself. Summoning the last remnants of my courage, I decided to follow him instead. I became the Watcher, hoping to find some clue about his true identity and motives. My days were now spent tailing the mysterious man from a safe distance. The tables had turned, and I became the pursuer in this nightmarish game of cat and mouse. The adrenaline coursed through my veins as I tracked his every move, trying to predict his next steps. In my pursuit, I noticed patterns in his behavior. He seemed to linger in the most unassuming places, observing people from the shadows. I discovered that I wasn't his only subject of interest. He appeared to watch many others, like an unblinking eye surveying the world. The gravity of his actions weighed heavily on me. It wasn't just about me anymore. He posed a real threat to innocent lives. As I continued to observe him one evening, I noticed him following a young woman who had just left a nearby cafe. Instinctively, I knew I had to intervene before he could harm another innocent soul. My heart raced as I called the police, providing them with his location and a detailed description of the man. Within minutes, sirens blared through the city streets, and a squad of police officers arrived, surrounding the man before he could realize what was happening. Panic flashed across his face as he attempted to flee, but the officers quickly apprehended him. As they led him away in handcuffs, he shot me a malevolent glare, his eyes filled with malice. In that moment, I felt a mix of relief and fear. Relief that he was finally caught, but fear that he would come after me once he was released. The police began their investigation, and it turned out that the man had a disturbing history. He was a loner, obsessed with watching people, documenting their lives in a twisted journal filled with chilling narratives and sketches. His arrest revealed a dark and disturbed mind that had been tormenting not just me, but many others in the city. During the trial, evidence emerged of his plans to harm me. A knife was found in his possession, and chillingly detailed notes outlined his intentions. It was clear that he had intended to carry out an act of violence, and I shuddered at the thought of what might have happened had I not taken action. In the courtroom, I faced him again, this time from the safety of a witness stand. His cold gaze sent shivers down my spine, but I stood firm, determined to see justice served. The weight of his malevolence was now exposed to the world, and it was evident that his twisted desires had driven him to the brink of madness. The jury found him guilty on multiple charges, including attempted murder. He was sentenced to a lengthy prison term, ensuring that he would be kept away from society and unable to harm anyone else. While his incarceration brought some sense of closure, I knew that the scars he left on my soul would take time to heal. The paranoia and fear lingered, but I refused to let it define me. With the support of my friends and family, I sought therapy to help process the trauma and regain control over my life. As the months passed, the grip of fear slowly loosened its hold on me. I found solace in the little joys of life and rediscovered the strength to step outside my comfort zone. Though the memories of that creepy grocery store experience and the man who had haunted me would never fully fade, they no longer dominated my thoughts. I became an advocate for safety awareness, sharing my story to help others recognize the signs of danger and seek help when needed. My ordeal had taught me that evil could lurk anywhere, but it had also shown me the resilience of the human spirit. Life would never be the same after that harrowing experience, but it had also made me stronger. I learned to appreciate the precious moments, finding comfort in the laughter of loved ones and the warmth of the sun on my face. And so, with the darkness behind me, I stepped forward into the light, ready to embrace the uncertainties of life and grateful for the second chance that had been granted to me. Late one evening, after a long day at work, I found myself in the neighborhood supermarket to grab a few items before heading home. The store was nearly empty, with only a few customers wandering the aisles. As I went about my shopping, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching me. I dismissed it as paranoia and continued picking up the items on my list. But every time I glanced around, I caught sight of a man in a dark hoodie, lurking at the far end of the aisles, just out of my line of sight. My unease grew with each passing minute. I convinced myself that it was just a coincidence, that the man was simply another customer going about his business. But as I made my way to the checkout counter, I noticed him again, watching me from a distance. I decided to leave the store, hoping to escape the feeling of being observed. As I stepped outside, relief washed over me, and I hurried to my car. But as I drove away, I saw him standing by the supermarket entrance, his eyes fixated on me. In the following days, the feeling of being watched persisted. I noticed the same man at various places around town, at the park, outside my workplace, and even near my home. It was as if he was following me, always lurking in the shadows, just out of reach. Feeling increasingly uneasy, I decided to confront him one day. As I approached, he quickly turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd. It only fueled my fear and curiosity further. I began to take precautions, locking my doors and windows, installing security cameras, and varying my daily routine. But no matter what I did, he seemed to know my every move. One night as I returned home from a late dinner with friends, I noticed a faint noise coming from inside my house. My heart pounded in my chest as I cautiously entered, only to find signs of a break-in. Someone had been inside, rifling through my belongings. I immediately called the police, and they searched the house thoroughly, but found no intruder. It was as if he had come and gone like a ghost, leaving no trace behind. Terrified, I confided in a close friend about the stalking, and they urged me to file a restraining order. But I couldn't shake the feeling that this man was always one step ahead, always lurking in the shadows, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The fear became suffocating, and I couldn't sleep at night. Every sound outside my window sent me into a state of high alert. It was as if I had become a prisoner in my own home, tormented by the relentless pursuit of this shadowy figure. One evening, as I returned home from work, I found a chilling note on my doorstep. It was a warning, a sinister message threatening harm if I didn't comply with his demands. The words sent a chill down my spine, and I knew that this was not just a case of stalking anymore. This man intended to hurt me, and I had no choice but to take action. Fearing for my life, I contacted the police again and provided them with all the evidence I had gathered. They launched a full investigation, but the man remained elusive, always managing to evade their grasp. With the support of the authorities, I decided to move to a different city, hoping to leave this nightmare behind. It was a difficult decision to uproot my life, but I knew it was the only way to escape the clutches of this relentless stalker. As I settled into my new home, I remained vigilant, always looking over my shoulder and taking extra precautions to protect myself. The fear never truly left me, and the memory of that sinister man still haunts my thoughts. I don't know what his intentions were or why he targeted me, but I will forever be haunted by the knowledge that there are individuals out there capable of such malevolence. This chilling experience serves as a constant reminder that danger can lurk in the most unexpected places, and that we must always be vigilant to protect ourselves from those who seek to do us harm. Despite the distance and new surroundings, the haunting presence of the stalker continued to cast a dark shadow over my life. I found it hard to trust anyone, constantly looking over my shoulder and analyzing every stranger's gaze for signs of familiarity. At first, the change of location brought some relief. The new city offered a fresh start, a glimmer of hope that I could finally escape the relentless pursuit. But as the days turned into weeks, the unsettling feeling returned. It seemed that no matter where I went, he was never far behind. Sleep became an elusive luxury, as every creak in the floorboards or rustle of the wind outside sent my heart into a frenzy. The fear began to seep into every aspect of my life, causing me to isolate myself from friends and colleagues, afraid of putting them in harm's way. Each morning, I would wake up to find strange markings on my front door, a chilling reminder that the stalker was still out there, watching and waiting. The police continued their investigation, but any leads they uncovered turned out to be dead ends. The man seemed to possess an uncanny ability to avoid detection, making him an elusive and enigmatic figure. The fear of the unknown consumed me, and I couldn't bear the constant torment any longer. Determined to take control of the situation, I decided to take matters into my own hands. I reached out to a private investigator with a reputation for solving difficult cases. Detective Mason, a seasoned investigator with piercing blue eyes and an air of confidence, took on the challenge. As we sat together in my living room, I recounted every detail of the stalking incidents, providing him with all the evidence I had gathered. "This stalker seems to be one step ahead of everyone," I sighed, frustration evident in my voice. "I feel like I'm losing my mind." Detective Mason's reassuring smile gave me a glimmer of hope. "I understand how you must feel, but we'll get to the bottom of this. We just need to think like the stalker." Over the next few days, Detective Mason and I worked closely, piecing together clues and reconstructing the stalker's patterns. He was meticulous, analyzing every detail, every encounter, as if trying to get inside the stalker's mind. As our investigation deepened, we discovered a connection among the victims: the supermarket. All of us had crossed paths in that very store at some point before the stalking began. Detective Mason was convinced that this was where the stalker was selecting his targets. With this crucial lead in mind, we decided to conduct surveillance at the supermarket. Late one evening, we parked in an inconspicuous spot, our eyes fixed on the entrance, waiting for any suspicious activity. Hours passed in tense anticipation, and just as I was about to lose hope, Detective Mason nudged me and pointed toward the store. There, emerging from the shadows, was the figure I had feared for so long, the stalker. My heart pounded and I struggled to control my breathing. Detective Mason remained calm, focused on the task at hand. As the stalker moved through the parking lot, we discreetly followed, making sure to keep a safe distance. The stalker entered a rundown apartment building, and we waited outside, ready to strike when the time was right. Detective Mason contacted the police and informed them of the situation, requesting backup. Suddenly, the stalker emerged from the building again, as if he sensed he was being watched. He glanced around, his eyes darting from one direction to another. Our hearts skipped a beat, but we remained hidden, not wanting to spook him. As he made his way back to the supermarket, the police arrived, surrounding the area. Detective Mason signaled for them to wait, wanting to catch the stalker red-handed. We continued to trail him, our heartbeats echoing in our ears. But then, as if he knew he was being pursued, the stalker's demeanor changed. He started to walk faster, and before we knew it, he disappeared into a crowd. Detective Mason cursed under his breath, but we didn't give up. We combed the area, searching for any sign of the stalker. As we circled back to the supermarket, we noticed something peculiar: an alleyway beside the store, hidden from plain view. Detective Mason's eyes lit up with determination. "This might be his escape route," he whispered. "Let's go." With cautious steps, we approached the alley. It was dark, and the stench of garbage hung heavy in the air. As we moved deeper into the narrow passage, we heard shuffling sounds ahead. I gripped the handle of my pepper spray, ready for anything, but what we found at the end of the alley shocked us both. The stalker was there, sitting on a crate, his hood pulled low over his face. Detective Mason moved in swiftly, shining his flashlight on the stalker's face. The man flinched, but he didn't attempt to run. There was something in his eyes: fear, desperation, and perhaps a hint of remorse. "Hands where I can see them," Detective Mason barked, his voice commanding and unwavering. The stalker complied, raising his hands hesitantly. His face was a mix of emotions, his guilt evident as he stood before us, caught red-handed in his sinister pursuit. "Why are you doing this?" I demanded, my voice shaking with a mixture of anger and fear. The stalker hesitated for a moment, his eyes darting nervously between me and Detective Mason. I don't know," he stammered. "It's just a thrill, you know, watching people, following them. It's like a game." Detective Mason's jaw clenched, his eyes narrowing at the stalker's callous admission. "A game? You think this is some kind of sick game?" he retorted, his voice laced with contempt. The stalker seemed to shrink under Detective Mason's intense gaze, but he refused to reveal any more about his motivations or the extent of his actions. With a steely resolve, Detective Mason placed the stalker under arrest, reading him his rights. As he was handcuffed and led away by the police, I couldn't help but feel a mix of relief and anger. This twisted individual had invaded my life, preying on my sense of security and leaving me in a state of perpetual fear. The police investigation continued, revealing a history of the stalker's unsettling behavior. He had been watching and following multiple individuals, reveling in the power he felt from invading their personal space and privacy. In the following days, I provided statements and evidence to assist in the prosecution. The legal process was arduous, but I was determined to see justice served. The trial was a harrowing experience, having to confront the stalker in court, recounting the distressing moments of being followed and watched. Yet, I persevered, knowing that it was crucial to hold him accountable for his actions. Ultimately, the stalker was convicted on multiple charges, and he received a substantial prison sentence. While it wouldn't undo the fear and anxiety he had inflicted upon me, it brought a sense of closure, knowing that he wouldn't be able to harm anyone else. As time passed, the supermarket returned to being a place of normalcy. Though I couldn't help but glance over my shoulder from time to time, the haunting memories still lingering. With the support of loved ones and therapy, I slowly regained a sense of security and learned to cope with the trauma. The experience had changed me, making me more vigilant and cautious, but it also taught me the strength I possessed in facing adversity. Detective Mason remained a pillar of support throughout the process, checking in on me regularly to ensure I was doing well. His dedication to serving and protecting the community left a lasting impact on me, and I found solace in knowing that there were people like him who would go to great lengths to keep others safe. Though the scars of the stalking would always be a part of my past, I refused to let it define my future. I channeled my experience into advocating for better safety measures and awareness about the dangers of stalking. As I moved forward, I vowed to cherish the ordinary moments in life, the simple trips to the supermarket, and the feeling of security that had been temporarily taken away. For in the face of darkness, I had discovered the strength of my own resilience and the unwavering support of those who stood by me. Working the overnight shift at the supermarket wasn't something I looked forward to, but bills needed to be paid, and the graveyard hours offered a slight pay increase. The store transformed at night, becoming an eerie and isolated place. The constant buzz of the neon lights and the faint humming of the refrigerators created an unsettling atmosphere that sent shivers down my spine. One particularly gloomy winter night, I found myself alone, except for my coworker Sam. The darkness outside seemed to seep into the store, intensifying the feeling of isolation. I tried to focus on my tasks, but an inexplicable sense of unease settled over me. As the clock struck midnight, the store became almost oppressively quiet. The only sound was the occasional beep of the checkout registers as customers scanned their purchases at the self-checkout stations. I decided to take a quick break to get some fresh air, hoping it would clear my mind. As I stepped outside, the chilly air wrapped around me, offering a brief respite from the claustrophobic atmosphere inside. When I returned, Sam was nowhere to be found. I figured he must have stepped into the break room or the restroom, but something felt off. I called out his name, but there was no response. Unease settled in my gut as I continued my work, my eyes darting around, half expecting to see Sam appear out of the shadows. The feeling of being watched lingered, making my skin crawl. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed through the store. My heart leaped into my throat, and I rushed to the source of the noise. The aisle leading to the back of the store was strewn with toppled shelves and scattered products. "Sam!" I called out, my voice trembling with fear. There was a low moan, and I saw movement among the wreckage. Sam emerged from behind a fallen display, his face pale and his eyes wide with terror. Someone was in here," he stammered, his voice barely audible. I could feel the hair on the back of my neck stand on end. We searched the store, but there was no sign of anyone else. The emergency exit was still locked from the inside, and the security cameras showed no one entering or leaving the store. The rest of the night felt like a waking nightmare. Every shadow seemed to hide some unseen threat, and the smallest noise made my heart race. Sam and I stuck together, trying to find solace in each other's company. As the first light of dawn crept through the windows, I breathed a sigh of relief. The night shift was finally over, and I couldn't wait to leave the store behind. but just as I was about to exit the building, I spotted something that made my blood run cold. In the corner of my eye, I caught a glimpse of a figure standing among the empty shopping carts. It was a man, tall and shadowy, wearing a tattered jacket. His face was obscured by the hood, but I could feel his eyes boring into mine, watching, waiting. "Hey, who are you? What do you want?" I called out, my voice shaking. The figure didn't respond, but I could see a malicious grin form on his face. Without another word, I turned and ran, not daring to look back. As I reached the safety of my car, I glanced back at the store one last time. The figure was gone, but the feeling of being watched remained, like a haunting presence lingering in the shadows. I never worked another overnight shift at that supermarket. The experience left me scarred, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something malevolent had taken up residence in that store. To this day, I avoid going near it after dark, haunted by the memory of that night and the sinister figure that still haunts my nightmares.